That became our limiting factor. We were able to, build the academic wing, the media center, the cafeteria, and all those functions in that first three-story addition, which, quite frankly, worked out pretty well. We were a little bit closer to the wetlands, and it was a concern, but we resolved that with Carrie from the wetlands office. And actually, there were some advantages in a way that when you build in that limited area, we had to make sure we've got all of the academic spaces within there. We actually gained the classroom, and I say gained the classroom because we were trying to minimize the square footage. Our overall square footage, we went from, I think, 105, 300 to 106, 100. But that can't be avoided because part of it has to do with just the circulation and the configuration that we're dealing with now. But as a result of that, I want to say that increase in square footage really gave us some more academic space, which was something that I believe some of the teachers had said, it'd be nice to have another classroom for English. We had gone down from 6 to 5, so we're back up to 6. Okay. So that's one of the things that we've identified in the program portion of the educational specifications. So this spreadsheet that you see that's in the documents itself, most of it is very similar to what we had before. We just went through and refined it and tied it back to the floor plans that we developed to make sure that from a square footage perspective, it's consistent. And I'm just focusing on the big picture things. The other component in the ed spec and also in the plan that works for us is now that we're literally the same distance away as the existing building is, the music program comes back into play. I mean, we've got a really nice music space there. So we were able to reduce from 2 music spaces to 1 music space in the program and utilize those existing rooms in the educational specifications. So you notice that in many cases the spaces are identified, but it says existing to remain. So that was another, so we gained a little square footage from that in that area, and we were able to use that for technology education, for physical education. We were pretty tight on some of those programs, so those programs grew a little bit. Music did go, there's still program space there, but it's more of a general classrooms that could be potentially, can be used also for other functions. So that's something that could be resolved as we move along. So from a programming point of view, those are really the highlights of the changes. And I know we've printed out a whole bunch of pages here, but the big picture is, because this includes concept plans, it includes other narratives, and I was just trying to go through and make sure that we're consistent, because there's so many places that we mention certain things, and I'm still, it's been a couple of days since we were told we had to do this, so I want to give this, we don't have to submit this to the state till after the town council votes on it. So it gives me a chance to just go through and make any edits that I might have missed as I'm going through it and the 40% and submit to the state. So those were the big picture issues. The other is that we did, as you're aware, as a phased approach. It will be, students will go outside to go back in, and that's just part of the approach. So even on phase 1, there's a smaller distance that the students would travel, but to get to the auditorium, the construction is going to be a little disruptive. So we did define and showed everybody the phasing plan.
Where's the phasing plan? I'm just trying to see how long it will take to build.
So timeline-wise, I think it adds about 12 to 14 months to the overall schedule.
It added 12 to 14 months to the overall schedule,
yes.
Which is?
So it's 36 to 40 months, whereas before we were about 24 months in that time frame. And that includes the completion of the site work. So what happens is it takes the demolition phase and breaks it into 3 phases. So we're going to demolish the first phase where we're building the building, and we'll demolish the second phase, and then the final phase. So that means the contractor has to mobilize and demobilize 3 times, basically. And the other complication is it's now more proximate to students and education going on, so they have to be a lot more careful. I mean, they have to be careful anyway, but it's another level of security that we have to be.
Are there health risks to the kids with tearing down a building so close, like any demolition being close to them, or how are those risks being mitigated?
So what we always recommend is that portion of the work take place when the students are not in school.
Okay.
So that's, so the first demolition phase has to be done when the students are not in school, especially because there is hazmat in the building. We, even though we will abate it before we demolish it. It's just because it's hidden areas that that you can encounter hazmat. So that's going to be the recommendation when we sat down with the construction manager and estimator. That's how we planned it all. So we've done many projects with ONG, and they, were aware and also agree with me that that's the approach we'll take. And so that's why it extends the project out that much longer.
What other risks would somebody who doesn't know construction, what should we be concerned about as far as risk? I mean, it looks beautiful on paper. I think that the ad hoc committee and you have done a phenomenal job. I just kind of want to understand, other than, health hazard materials, like, are there other risks involved in this type of a project that the board should be aware of?
The biggest risk will be the proximity of construction to where the students are. So what we always emphasize is that the fence that's going to separate the construction zone has to be, we'll get into a lot of details about how it should be specified. We try to maintain a certain distance. There has to be protocols in place for the contractors, the construction managers notifying the educators, because there are going to be times when you need, especially when there's testing going on, we don't want a lot of noise and they can't have activities that are going to generate a lot of noise. So that communication has to be greatly increased with the contractors and the administration. No matter how well you try to plan something will always go wrong. There'll be power outage or something. They'll cut a wire or something or the other. Much as we try to plan it, so you just have to be agile in our ability to respond to it. And so selecting the right team for the construction portion of it is extremely important. And most of the large would be more than likely involved in this job would be, are well aware of those types of issues. We're taking away one of the fields, the hockey field, I believe it is.
Correct, as a staging area.
As a staging area, so you will be down one field from an athletic point of view. So that introduces a challenge, but that whole area will be fenced in.
And will that be refurbished later? Is that what I was?
That's correct.
Okay.
So once all the work is done, then we'll come back and refurbish. The plan also shows an area that's undeveloped. So I know there's been, if there's any portions of the far side of the building that needs to be maintained for whatever reason, if there's a program that can go in there, what I did do is look at some options of that. If you wanted to keep that not as far up as the gym, but really towards the end of the building, I think that with the 66 edition, the second edition that was in the building, that there's an opportunity to potentially save that. It all depends on the type of use that you place in that. So, but in general, as it's related to this project, there's ample room for parking.
Yeah.
As you saw on the layout, when we've developed it, the layout is actually, I like it mainly because not just the proximity, it creates sort of a quad so you've got the auditorium and then it's flanked by the high school and the intermediate school.
Yeah.
It really, ideally I'd want to put not parking in there, but more open green space, but that's not to be. One of the challenges we had was to make sure that there's adequate parking that support the auditorium, you know, equal to what we currently have. And
Right.
that's why you'll notice that the parking went on the other side closer to the field. Luckily, there's room there. So we're gonna be trying to, you know, pull in as much parking as we can to make sure that at a minimum that same count of cars is available. We're also looking at a way that people can move from the new parking lot to the auditorium in an event that you need more than 175, 180 parking spaces. Other concerns, let me see. No, it's going to be most typically, you know, so you're down a field. Obviously, when we're going to talk about construction activities, and when the construction activities are going on, how do the students come in, when do the students come in, the movement of vehicular traffic, both buses and parents and student traffic. We'll have to come up with a very defined plan as to at each phase of the project. Now the good news is that the building the use is being changed, but the site will pretty much remain the same through the construction duration. So I think for the most part we'll be able to develop one plan, maybe modify it slightly for the duration of the construction in terms of where the buses go, where the parents drop off, and where the students park. In many instances, in many schools, you know, sometimes only seniors are parking, and then that's one of the things that could happen here as well. You know, but that's a discussion for later on when we look at it and see what everybody can bear. We did look at portables, you know, bring portable classrooms on board, and agreed that it was not worth the money.
Yeah.
You know, and the other question became, where do you put them? You know, that means you lose even more parking space, and then you have other utility costs. So as a result of that, when we looked at all the existing spaces, you know, you do have a slightly declining enrollment, so that gave us some flexibility in terms of losing those 13 classrooms that we're going to demolish, but then able to make them up in other spaces. You know, it might mean temporarily, at least for a year, you might lose a home ec space or some classrooms that are right now very generously being occupied, you know, for small groups. You might have to be more efficient than that. That's a discussion that we'd have with the administrators. But in our initial discussion with them, they all felt that it was something that was viable and could be done, because that was one of the first concerns about this approach.
Rusty, if this project gets approved, when will the construction start? I'm just trying to figure out in my mind what class is going to be.
So that's one of the challenges, because we're as far out as we are. Ideally, when we first, and one of the things that I updated in this document was the schedule, because when we were initially doing this, when we submitted it, we said, you know, the documentation should have started in July, so we could be out to bid in April. Now we're not even starting the documentation, and and our budget constraints are still the same. We've set a summer start. So what I reviewed with the construction manager and estimator was that we would look at doing it as a two-phase project to take advantage and not lose any time. So we would bid the site package, the demolition package, and the structural package in phase one. For phase one of the building, that would be bid first, which means we'd go to the state for that specific area to be approved, and then we'd go for a second submission to the state for phase two, which would be the rest of the project. What that would enable us to do is get the construction started in the June timeframe, and then get the rest of it. Because once you're in the ground and your slab's poured and so on, and the demo work is done, then it's easier to go up from there. So we think we can still salvage the schedule in that sense. It's also will be to our advantage to do that, because what we're seeing in construction is that the contractors are looking for work. There's not a lot of new buildings that are coming up. So what's going to happen in the spring, summer timeframe is a lot of people are going to be looking to get their workload filled in.
Yeah.
And the earlier we're out, the better the numbers are gonna be.
But are they seeing, because I mean, I know, and it's on such a small level, but a friend of mine redid her bathroom and everything was on back order. So, I mean, is that playing into part with anything where supplies, materials are, you know, you need to order 3 months earlier because of what's currently going on in the country?
And that's going to be part of the discussion as we go on, but those are the long lead items are now out maybe another month or two. We identify those really early in the process.
Okay.
So by that two-phase approach, you know, concrete and you know, excavation and demolition, that's not impacted so much, but we still have to be aware that the other materials have to be bid. The bigger issue becomes, you don't want to be late in the bidding process because then everybody's filled their you know,
Right.
backlog, and now
Yeah.
you're going to be dealing with that. I mean, we just had a high school bid out, and you know, it's a similar size $64 million project, and we came in $5 million under.
Oh, that's great.
So it's allowing us to do things that
That's
you
really
know we did not envision doing. I mean, that's not to say that that'll
Yeah,
happen.
no,
Right, no, no.
It's just
the possibility is
it's
there.
yes,
But we can dream.
yes.
Exactly.
Right. Does anyone else have any other questions for Rusty?
I think these things that he's saying that, you know, need to be discussed in classrooms, I think everybody's willing to work together. Everybody wants this project so badly that they're gonna suck it up for a year and do what needs to be done, you know,
Yeah.
to get this going.
Could I, before we make the motion? This has been a long ride. This has been many conversations over many years. I want to thank Beth for the time and energy you put in with the ad hoc committee. That was aggressive, and having an educator on the committee and walking through the buildings and understanding the language was a big help. And I want to thank Al Rose for his leadership with that group. And I think that pushed us to that next point. I look back in this and where we were and what the obstacles were and where we're at tonight. And I'm not predicting anything, we still have another hurdle to go over, but I think this body with the Board of Ed has done everything they could possibly do. So I want to thank you, Beth. And I want to thank Rusty. This originally started off as a feasibility study, and I think everyone would agree he went well above and beyond
Absolutely.
to work with us, to accommodate us, and has been a pleasure to work with, and putting this together in 48 hours from our state call is greatly appreciated. So I thank you.
Yes, very
Yeah,
much so.
last night we had a meeting, a communication meeting, and the town council's and the Board of Ed's relationship was compared to a marriage. And I said, I'm hoping now we're in a flourishing stage of the marriage. All relationships ebb and flow, but I feel this was an enormous effort of collaboration.
Yeah.
It took patience on both sides and trust as they moved through that ad hoc committee, and I have to say, I feel like both bodies are in a very good place to move forward in the best interest of the students of North Branford.
Agreed.
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 And I had asked Rusty at one of the ad hoc about time frame, and if we start in June, and you said about 12 months, maybe 14 months. So if we start in June and build, then there's only 1 year lost where the kids can go into the
academic
classroom
section,
portion.
yeah.
But then they still have to use the old gym and
But
part
they
of
get a
that.
little bit of the.
But they get,
Yeah.
They
well,
get a
a good portion, they get new
Yes.
classes, a new media center, that kind of thing. So
And that's very
by
positive.
the end of, what,
We'll start
this is
September
22, the
Mhm.
kids going in for 22 will have a new section of school, and then they gotta put up with the old gym, but still,
Yeah,
Our current sophomores,
yeah.
yeah.
our current
Yeah.
sophomores would reap the,
Which is nice.
My son,
Yeah,
so.
so it's exciting.
He is a sophomore,
nice.
so.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
It looks like they're light at the end of the tunnel
Yes,
here.
they deserve it, yeah.
And consider that that's the majority, the larger portion of the building that's being built. Because the one-story in a space with the gymnasium and all, that's a much smaller footprint in square footage. So that'll go, you know, so roughly in the same amount of time they'll have the new school in terms of the facilities. What they won't have is just the finishes on the outside, the site work, and some of the
Yeah.
demolition will still be going on.
I don't think anyone will
Yeah, if we don't have a few bushes.
No.
about the project, honestly, as long as it's done safely. I know that many in this town that have walked through the halls of the school as students themselves, I know kids that are currently in the school, everyone's backing it. It's for the best interest of the town itself and the kids.
Absolutely.
Even people that don't have kids are like,
Yes.
are really, yeah.
No, because it's good for the town. It's good for the town.
Okay, all right. So I'd like to make first motion to approve the amended education specifications prepared for the North Branford High School based on a new building project.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call vote, Mary?
Got it. Chairman Papa
Yes.
Secretary Sienna,
Yes.
Jana Balsamo,
Yes.
Vincent Mace,
Yes.
Marcia Nafrio,
Yes.
Cynthia Rice.
Yes.
I'd also like to make a motion to approve option 6 of this approach amends the new facility design for North Branford High School facility identified as option 3 to be a phased construction approach of a new high school facility, current reimbursement 43.93%, and to develop a new right-size high school facility on the existing site that accommodates the educational programs for a 21st century learning environment.
Second.
Discussion?
I have a question. By putting the 43.93% in there, does that hurt us if it changes?
This wording came exactly from the state. So what we were instructed to do was to get the exact verbiage from the state, so you could ask Scott and Rusty.
I just
It was like,
If it goes down to 42 or 41, so you're, wait a minute, you said it was the reimbursement was
yeah,
43.
that's a great question, Vince. We were told to put the exact verbiage in, so Rusty went and got the spot-on verbiage from the state. This is what they told us to
Question
put
the
in.
chair, but, okay.
And
Yeah.
that percentage is locked in. It's based on when you apply, so we applied June of this year, and that's what your percentage is. If you were applying next year, for instance, it would go down by 0.7, so it would be something
Okay.
less.
I'm good.
Okay, Mary?
Chairman Papa
Yes.
Secretary Sienna,
Yes.
Jana Balsamo,
Yes.
Vincent Mace,
Yes.
Marcia Nafrio,
Yes.
Cynthia Rice.
Yes.
Motion.
Thank you, board.
You're
This is a
welcome.
big step.
This is
This is a
exciting.
huge, exciting step.
Now,
Thank you.
does the
Oh, you have.
town council, does their amendment have to be the exact same?
No, so they have a resolution that they'll
Oh,
read,
they
which
do.
will change numbers based on their original one, so theirs is
And
different.
again,
And Rusty is working with the state, with the town, to make sure everything is to the T.
we had one
Actually,
shot
we just did
together.
that, just before I came
That's-
down
well,
here.
that's what the state
I got
told
it
us.
from the people.
Because they weren't too happy
Okay,
with that
so
Zoom meeting. They were-
Rusty shared that before he came in tonight, he did have the conversation with the state, they did the resolution,
Okay.
and it'll be ready to go.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you again.
Thank
Thank
Rusty,
you,
for
thank you,
putting it
Rusty.
down.
Very excited.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We all second.
Thank you, guys.
You had 5 seconds.